Okay, so I'm Lorena O. English, and I'm a librarian at the WSU Pullman Libraries. I'm a social sciences and government information librarian. So this is kind of right in my wheelhouse for the sort of things people sometimes ask me about. And my contact information is on the screen. You can see I'm oenglish at wsu.edu and WSU Lorena on Twitter if you want to reach me that way. Something that I realized was that I had a lot of links, and it takes a while for these webinars to actually be kind of be processed. So what I'm going to do is I have this link right here, and I'm going to put this in the chat. I haven't done it yet, but let's go ahead and, oops, let's go back. There we are. I'll just actually go to this link because then it'll be easier to capture it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this link in the chat because this will be where I place all the links that I have in this session so that you'll be able to go back and get them afterwards. Okay. So let me kind of find my mouse here. There we are. I have two monitors, and I thought I was the only one who lost her mouse all the time. And then I find out that lots of other people have the same problems. Okay, so since we're talking about kind of data, I was thinking about kind of, data about us. And I was like, okay, what sort of data can I think about me? And so I thought, well, I'm a social sciences and government information librarian. That's my occupational data. I have two dogs. That's family data, and a spouse too. This is Celia, who is a datum, and this is Max, who is another datum. And other data about me, I am a fan of science fiction and fantasy and space opera, and also romance. I'm also a fan of comics. I'm kind of geekish, and I am a traveler. So each of these are a little bit of data that go together to actually kind of make up who I am. And if any of you would like to share some info data about yourselves, feel free to kind of put something in the chat window. An item of data about yourself. And data can be quantifiable, or a number, or it can be sort of description, like social sciences and government information, comics fan, etc. So let's see if anybody wants to share any data, and you don't have to, of course. Okay, Aaron. Aha, Aaron shares many of these characteristics, but he has additional data. He is an avid hiker, and he's a communications student. So we have a little bit of overlap between our data, which is the start of a data set. Okay, thank you so much. And Andrea, she likes coffee. She's a WSU employee, so I like coffee too, let me tell you. And WSU employee, and she loves reading fiction. So we actually have, we're actually creating a data set among those of us who are present. And those of you who might be watching this in the future might think about some data items about yourself. Okay, so let's go ahead, bring my mouse back over here. What we're going to do today is kind of do a little bit of an introduction. We'll talk about some WSU resources, and we'll talk about three things in particular: SAGE research methods, ICPR, and I'll explain what that acronym means, Roper iPoll, and I'll explain why it has brackets and stars by it. And we'll also talk a little bit about how you can keep up with those resources and find out about new things that they're offering and new information about working with social science data. We'll talk a little bit about kind of locating data sets in the wild, and then we'll kind of conclude. Okay, so when I was thinking about data, one of the things that I thought about was that there really is data about everything. And of course, I'm really focused on social science data. So, that's kind of where my data is going to be. But obviously there's data in the sciences, there's lots of data in the medical field, there's data in the humanities, which can be sort of narrative data as well as quantifiable data. But you can see there's really data out there and data sets about virtually everything. And one of the things that I thought about was the distinction between data and statistics. And rather than reinventing the wheel, I found this really good site from another librarian. You can see Katie Weisel right there. And she offers a really good description of the difference between data and statistics. And you can see, she says, data is the raw material produced by research. And it's usually going to be in this sort of a format. And it's designed to be read by a machine. And that can pretty much mean that it's designed to be read by Excel, or it's designed to be read by specific statistical analysis packages that are available out there. But our data is usually kind of look like this and doesn't really make a lot of sense to us. Statistics, however, are going to be an aggregated description of a data set. They're interpreting or summarizing the data set, and it's usually going to be done in tabular format. And, they're basically something that you can use. You can just go ahead and kind of find the data on the screen. You can extract it. You can stick it in a paper, all those sorts of stuff. So, and she kind of gives an example about that. So I liked how she did that. And it was a good reminder that I'm probably going to use data and statistics a little bit kind of, both at the same time, because I'm a little bit sloppy. But it's really important to remember that they're actually different and that statistics generally are going to be sort of an output of data itself. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about our first resource, which is Sage Research Methods. And what Sage Research Methods is, it is a full text digital library database. And something that I want to point out right now that's really important is it also is everything. You can download everything. It's digital rights management free, virtually everything that we can download it. It's a process resource. You're not going to go here to actually get data sets, but you'll go here to find qualitative and quantitative methods. To learn how to actually work with data, and not just work with data itself, but a lot of the other things. How do I write research? How do I work with tables? How do I write a literature review? All those sorts of things. And it has a lot of information in it, and it's going to have books, articles, video, references, case studies, data sets to practice with, podcasts, and more. So we're going to go ahead and do a demonstration of Sage Research Methods. And here I am. I took myself over here from the library's homepage. I went to our A to Z database list, and you can see there's Sage Research Methods. I just typed it in the little box over there. And we'll go ahead and look at this. So when I'm in Sage Research Methods, the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually log in with my profile. And you can see that I'm actually already logged in there, but you can go ahead and create a profile, and you really want to do that, because if you create a profile, one of the things that you can do that we'll see a little bit later is that you can actually create reading lists that can be private lists or public lists. So it's really handy to actually create an account. Just kind of an aside, virtually all of our databases allow you to create an account, and there's all sorts of really cool things that you can do once you do. It's really a good idea to do that. All right, so we're going to kind of take a look at what Sage Research Methods is all about. And I'm just going to kind of go from top to bottom. First thing I want to talk about is kind of what's in it. You can see you can browse here by topic, by discipline, and by content types. And I want to note that the topics are very definitely sorts of process topics, data collection, research design, data science, researcher development. That's a really important one. How do you learn how to become a researcher who works with data? Under disciplines, you can see most of these are social science disciplines, but there are some that actually they're starting to move a little bit into the humanities. You can see history over here, and they're starting to move a little bit into science and mathematics and technology, some of sort of non-social science topics. So really, they're all social sciences in their own way. And this is a reminder about all the different content types that we have. So if you wanted to see everything that they had for, say, economics, we could go ahead and click on economics. And we'll kind of do this a little bit later, but you can see I'm filtered by discipline. Right now, the very first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to bump up the responses per page. I'll bump it up to 50. I do that because I ask every time I teach a class, I ask people, how many web pages, how many result pages of search engines do you go through? When you get a database says that they have, 900 results, how many pages of 10 results do you go through? And virtually everyone says like 2 or 3, because, there's only so much we can do. So I trick myself, and I really advise everybody else to do this. And there's 2 ways that I do it. First way is I do results per page, and 100 is 80 and 100, maybe a little bit too much for right now, but we'll go ahead and do 50. That way, even if I'm only looking at 2 or 3 pages, now I'm looking at 150 instead of 30. That's something really helpful. The other thing that I do is I change my sort. I will actually do my sort a couple of different ways. And in this case, that's actually not going to help us very much, because relevance is really what we want, because relevance is sort of aboutness of our results. But sometimes you might want to make sure that you're getting the most recent thing available. So you might actually order it by original publication date as well. And you notice here we have a brief description of economics, and they've actually got some links in here. And then over here, we can kind of narrow. And we'll do a little bit more about that later on. But I'm going to move up now, and we'll talk about the research tools that Sage Research Methods have. So look at we'll look at the sort of methods, the content sort of methodsy ones first. And the first thing is the methods map. And this is just a really cool resource. My computer's been a little bit slow here, so we'll see how this works. That I can use to kind of help me get additional terms, think about how I define my topic in a broader or narrower way. Sometimes it just kind of gets my mind going in terms that I might use for searching or sort of thinking about different aspects of something. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can see they've got research methods here, and here's narrower terms, research ethics, quantitative data analysis, and we can go look at broader terms as well. So I'm going to search the methods map for a literature review. So kind of how do I do a particular thing? And you can see it's giving me a couple options. I'm going to choose the general literature review. And then over here, so here's my literature review. This lets me search all content on literature reviews, but I can go over to narrower terms. I can go to broader terms, planning research, related terms, find similar things. I'm going to look at my narrower terms, and I'm really interested in critical reading, writing, and thinking, because I've recognized that before I can actually think about writing my literature review, I really need to think about how do I read the articles? How do I extract out of them everything? How do I read them critically? So I'm going to look at this. And you can see here I have narrower terms reasoning. Here's my broader terms. This time I'm going to go look at search all content on critical reading, writing, and thinking. And when I do that, it's going to, again, I can narrow down over here. Let's kind of look at, you can see I can narrow by content type, or I can narrow by discipline, or I can narrow by result type. This one's pretty minimal, or publication date if I want to kind of look for recent stuff or whatever. But as I look at this, I find some things here that are really, and again, notice every single page I have to redo my results per page. So I'm kind of seeing some really interesting things here, and I'm seeing everything. I can narrow it down to just books if I want to do that. I'm going to unclick select all, and then I'll just go ahead and choose, we'll just do books general. And that's going to take out, sort of the encyclopedia entries, etc. And, here I have, why am I getting, yeah, there we are. I'm getting chapters instead of books, so I must have done something wrong. But, I see this book right here, and this title is totally exciting to me. My biggest research mistake, Adventures and Misadventures in Psychological Research. Because let's be honest, we learn a lot more from our screw-ups than we do when things go right. So this would be something that I'm really interested in reading. And remember, I said these are digital rights management free. That means that I can actually download every single chapter. I can read it on screen, and I can download the chapter like this, and it is mine to own, and at every point, it's actually going to suggest to me places that I might go for methods or related content. So it's sending me to other really useful things along the way. So that's just kind of a nice little thing. So I'm going to go back to the methods map. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do something a little bit different. This time, instead of the literature review, we'll think about an actual research method. So I've heard a lot about meta-analysis. So I'm like meta-analysis. Whoops, let's go back over here. Go back to this. Meta-analysis. And you can see there it is. And by the way, it also would have shown it to me as one word. So I can click on this, and I can actually go kind of find out what this all means. I can actually search for all content. I get a brief little description here. I can look for broader terms. A meta-analysis is a type of systematic review. So there's a lot, it's very helpful for me. And at any point, you'll notice up here, I can share this. I can, email it to myself, whatever. There is an accessibility mode that can be kind of helpful. And at any point, it's giving me help. And the help is contextual help. It knows that I'm in the methods map. So it's kind of explaining how the methods map works. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to our home page and just quickly look at some of the resources we have over here. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about the books that they have. So I can look at all the books and then kind of narrow them down by any topic that I'm interested in. We've kind of already done that, and it actually took me to that page. I can also look at video. And the video is kind of interesting. You can see these are video collections, and I can browse all of them or look at the options, and you'll always want to look at view more, but you can see browse by method, browse by discipline, browse by video type. So I want to see the videos that they have on ethnography, which is sort of a qualitative method. Sometimes when people hear research methods, they think only quantitative. There's a lot of stuff here that's qualitative. And you can see here's a video, an introduction to video diaries and video ethnography. And I can actually watch this video. It tells me a little bit about it. This is somebody basically speaking directly to me. These are all videos that are not available anyplace else. They were contracted by Sage, and they can be really helpful for kind of figuring things out. Okay, then we have your basic reference sorts of resources. It particularly points out two different particular books, the little green books and the little blue books. These are kind of famous. Sage is a really big social science publisher that's really noted for its method resources. The little green books are all about quantitative methods. The little blue books are all about qualitative methods. So they're actually pretty short. And you can see writing up qualitative research, participatory action. They're really kind of just giving you information that you need, and they can be really very helpful. So I'm going to go back over and we'll look at cases. And these cases are kind of fun. Again, one of the things about this is actually teaching you how to become a researcher. So you can see, again, I can browse by method, by discipline, or academic level. You can see postgraduate, advanced undergraduate, etc. I'm going to go ahead and choose focus groups. And you can see when I do this, it's going to give me a number of different cases for how I might kind of work with focus groups. So let's go ahead and look at this particular one, a deliberative inquiry. And when I do this, I can download this whole case report, but it's actually going to kind of talk about the project, give me an overview, explain it all to me. So this is sort of like the kind of the metadata about a research project. Kind of reading this case explains how somebody did what they did. It's not, it's not the article itself. It's kind of the process behind the article itself, going to that idea of this being a powerful tool for process resources. So I'm going to go back to Sage Research Methods, and we'll look at data analysis. This is actually really cool. One of the things that they've done is they give you data sets. If qualitative, they'll actually give you text. Quantitative, they give you data sets that you can download. Let's take a look at this. Their featured one right over here. Learn about cross-tabulation in SPSS. And they actually work with other statistical packages as well as SPSS, but this is the one that they're highlighting. And you can see basically, here's the data set, and you can preview what it looks like. These are actually data sets from real projects. They've just been kind of cleaned up a little bit and kind of streamlined. They're not as complex as they were originally. Then I can download it in a number of these different formats. And the format really matters. I want to choose the appropriate format for the way that I'm working with the data. If I'm using SPSS or if I'm using Stata or R, that's preferable to download it specifically for that particular software, because you can always download it as a tab delimited file or download it, for Excel or something. But every time you convert a file, sometimes there's some possibilities that you might leave some stuff behind. Probably not with this sort of data because it's pretty basic data. But in general, choose the most specific format for your particular needs. And then under teaching and learning material, this is a resource not just for students, it's also used by faculty. So you might actually run into this if you take a research methods class, because hopefully WSU faculty are aware of how great this is. But you can actually read the teaching guide for faculty, explaining sort of how they situate it, which can be kind of nice. We're going to go back. And you can see if I go back over here to teaching and learning, sometimes it gets stuck on where it is. This time I'm going to go find, here we are, the student guide. And this is just explaining how this all works, how crosstabs works, giving me an example, etc. And then they've got a little video at the bottom explaining how crosstab works inside of SPSS. So there's a lot here that I can really learn about. So there's a couple things that I didn't talk about on research tools. I kind of went into the methods map and then we went from there. So the other one that I want to talk about that's kind of really very technical is which stats test, just a really nice little thing. So I'm saying, okay, what am I going to do? I'm looking for differences between data. So, and at any point, help will actually explain me how this works. I'm going to look at differences between sets of data. And at any point, it's always going to show me other stuff that's available in Sage Research Methods. And you can see here is a chapter on choosing test statistics that kind of, gives us just that little diagram and might have lots of useful stuff. But I'm going to be like, okay, I'm looking for differences between sets of data. And then I'm working with more than 2 groups. And so, I mean, a lot of times you know what statistical test you're going to be using, but sometimes it's interesting to actually go through this process and see, well, maybe there's some different way that I might want to do this. So I'm just choosing my parameters as I go through. And at other times, if you're just really not sure which way to work, we're going to do nominal. It's all number data. And I can work through this, and then you can see here, it's actually giving me a recommendation. So, you know, I don't know how useful it is, but it really is good sometimes. I think it's the best use of it is thinking outside of the box. Instead of always doing things the same way, kind of thinking about the other options. So let's talk about the other resources here. Talk about reading lists, and because I'm logged in, I can create a reading list of my own. So I'm going to go over here and find them. But other people have made reading lists that are public, and I can actually search them. And these reading lists are going to be topical. It's taking a little while here. So I can find reading lists that other people have made on mixed methods. And you can see there, these will be reading lists that might be kind of helpful. I'm actually not going to let this happen because it's like totally slow. I'm going to go to my profile, and you can see my reading lists. These are ones that I've created. They're private, so only I can see them, but I can share them with other people. I can edit them, etc. And you can see here, you know, this one I made public. Yeah. Oh no, this one is private. Yeah. I can look at the details of it, and you can see there I'm just getting the titles. Here I get, you know, more information. This is a good way for sort of saving resources that are really helpful, or if you're working in a group project and you want to share resources with someone, you can basically create a reading list and share them with them. So it can really be kind of a nice thing. Then I want to talk about the project planner. And the project planner is really, really cool because you can see what it's doing is it's going through the research stages. You look over here and see philosophy of research, defining a topic, reviewing the literature, developing a question. And at every point on here, you know, it's actually going to kind of walk me through this, and I can walk through the whole process and kind of, you can see they're asking lots of different questions here. What is ontology and epistemology? Do all social scientists use the same methodology? And it's giving me all of these can be downloaded, you know, basically an overview about all of this, and ways to get to other places in SAGE research methods that might have more information. I'm going to go to reviewing the literature. So not only is this an outline for how I might do this, it's actually giving me some really good information along the way and referring me to other resources available in SAGE research methods. So this is a really good resource. It was very expensive, so we encourage you to use it. And the really cool thing is virtually everything, including the podcasts that it has over here, where you actually have people being interviewed talking about research methods, everything can be downloaded. And I really like it because it's not just, it really has a lot to do about developing you as a researcher, you know, in the case studies, in the podcasts, in the interviews, etc. And, you know, it's just kind of a really nice sort of database to look at. So that's SAGE research methods. So I'm going to kind of close up a bunch of my windows here, and we're going to go and then we're going to go look at the next resource. Make sure that I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. Not so far. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is ICPSR, or the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. And this is the granddaddy of social science research. They've been around for, I think, 50 years now. What they do is they basically figured out, you know what? Everybody creates these amazing data sets. They use them in their article, and then what happens to them? Wouldn't it be great if we could actually create a repository where people could share their data sets and they could go through a process that makes them all consistent, so they're easy to search, etc. And then people can, people can actually use these data sets over and over. They can use them for replication studies, or they can use them for other purposes. So it's basically a database of data sets that people have contributed, and it also has partnerships with other entities that create data. Some of their data sets actually have the ability to do a limited amount of on-site data analysis. So you can actually do data analysis in the browser without having to use an external program like R or Stata or something else like that. We'll look at the bibliography of data-related literature, which is really cool because it's all the articles that were written with these data sets. So it's a great way to find articles on topics, but also to kind of see how you write an article with data. How do you incorporate it? How do you write your figures? All that sort of stuff. And we'll see that there are resources for teaching and learning. There's a little bit of information on file formats as well. This explains the formats that they offer, gives some information on them. So I'm just going to go over here and click on ICPSR to go to the main page here. You can see here we are. And the very first thing that I want to do is I want to log in or create an account if I don't have one. And you'll notice that one of the options that it has for you is, I'm already logged in, darn it, let me log out so you can see this. Here we are. Okay, so now I'm going to log in again. Okay, I do not recommend using Google, LinkedIn, Google or LinkedIn for your, it's already logged me in really fast. Don't use Google, don't use LinkedIn. Orchid is okay, but in general, just creating an account with your email is really important. There's one thing I have to warn you about. You have to create your account when you are, when you're within WSU's IP ranges. So if you're off campus, that's okay. Just make sure you're using the university VPN or the library's proxy server, and that basically says, oh, they're coming from WSU, it's okay. But there's a really weird little aspect of ICPSR that's really irritating. Once you create the account, you have to log into it at least once every 6 months from, you know, the university VPN or the library's proxy server or whatever to keep your account. Otherwise, all you have to do is log in and you're good to go. Why do you want to have the account? The main reason is that a lot of the resources in ICPSR are freely available to anyone. And this is important to remember when you're no longer affiliated with WSU. You can still use ICPSR, but there are some data sets that you can only access if you belong to a member institution. WSU is one of those. So we're going to quickly take a look. You can see they have a number of events going on, and they have, you know, news, new data, a new repository, etc. You can see they're, you know, well known for the things that they have. They have over 15,000 studies in them with over 5 million variables. These are some of the collections that they have. These are arrangements that they've made with these organizations like the NACDA Program on Aging or the US Census or researchdata.gov or Child and Family Data Archive to include their data sets. And you can see these are all organizations who support ICPSR along with WSU as a member organization, and information down here. So we're going to go over and look at find data. And let's actually go ahead and you can browse it a little bit. You can see I can look for topics or series or thematic data collections. These, you can see there I got my little term here, a little bit about what they have. Restricted use data is data that actually has information that might potentially identify someone, or data that might, you know, be research is done with, you know, children. So you actually have to go through a special process to do that. So, and I can look at topics, I can look at series, you can see kind of general sorts of things. I can look at, you know, series that they have where they have multiple data sets that are about using the same process. You see polling data, balance of payments, etc. Not just the United States stuff, this is an international database. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead, there's some search tips over here, always good to look at those. We're gonna go ahead and look for student loans. And I'm going to do my search. Okay, and you can see I'm getting a whole bunch of student loans, student loan data over here, and I can filter by all these different types: geography, data format, time period, etc. And these are the studies. These are all the variables that are included with them, the variables that actually account for the studies. There's 144 data series in these. And data related publications. These are the articles that have been written using these particular studies. And then this takes me back to resources on their webpage. But I'm going to go back to this page and actually take a look at one of these studies so you can kind of see what they look like. So here's, you can see people are putting replication data in. That's a really big deal these days, a replication of studies. So we're going to look at the replication data for student loan nudges. Love that term. And you can see that it's actually going to provide us the data, little information about the data. There's a publication, and I can download this project over here. I can download the data itself. Actually, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do the replication one. I actually want to do a regular data set. So let's just choose this one. Cooperative Institutional Research Program, Freshman Survey 1979, because I didn't narrow this by date or anything else like that. So this is more like what you're going to get. It's been used 25 times, has 3 publications. So this is my description. There's some subject terms, geographical terms. I can look at the scope and the methodology over here, and version, which will tell me when it was, you know, sort of version history. My data and documentation can be downloaded from this next one. And you can see there it is. I can preview it if I want and download it. This will tell me what variables are included in this, and this will connect it to the publications. And this will actually show me exporting metadata, the different sort of exporting in these different forms. Okay, so it's kind of a great way to find data sets that I can use. A search and compare variables, I could actually go ahead and student loans, kind of look at the variables, kind of get information about these variables. These are all the same ones. So I'm going to look at this variable, and this one's a little bit different. And then I'll also go look at this one right here. So look at these three variables, and I'm going to compare them. And you can see this gives me a sense of the information about it, which might I might look at this and think, well, which one do I want to use? You can see I can actually look at the study. I can get a sense of how many responses and what the responses were, which can be kind of helpful. Data-related publications, this is the whole bibliography. So I'm going to I'm just going to look for something. I'm going to look for student loans. Okay, I'm going to do my search. And you can see loads and loads of articles. And in general, unfortunately, they're not going to have find it at WSU links. But once I have the citation, then it's pretty easy for me to plug it into Search It or other WSU library databases to actually find these articles. Okay, thematic data collections. You can see these are archives that they have, data on disability, data on interdisciplinary research on learning, etc. Really kind of helpful stuff. And then help. Always good to look at help. This actually gives me information about, about using data. And some of these things are really nice. They have this social science research and instructional glossary. They also have a glossary of other social science terms, et cetera, that kind of may help me think about some of these words if I'm unfamiliar with them. Okay, I want to emphasize though that this is not just what ICPSR is about. You can also start sharing data if you want. You can actually, if you create a data set, you can upload it to ICPSR, and then they'll kind of normalize it, clean it up a little bit, and put it in here. And there's actually a data preparation guide. If you are, whether or not you're actually going to archive with ICPSR, if you create data, this is an excellent guideline to making sure that you have really good data and not sloppy data that later on you're like, well, what was this all about? This will walk you through data management plans, kind of how to archive data, file correction, et cetera. It's really kind of helpful. Okay, then we're going to ignore membership summer program. If you're really interested in working with data, ICPSR has a summer program in quantitative methods of social research, which is all virtual next year because of the pandemic. It's a little bit pricey, but they try to keep the costs down as much as possible. And if you really want to really get into a very intensive period about how to do this, it can be really helpful. Okay, teaching and learning. Again, just like SAGE research methods, there are actually resources in here that will help you learn how to work with data. So I have these data-driven learning guides that I can use. And you can see if I kind of choose one of those, we'll look at aging and caregiving. This is basically going to actually show me, kind of walk me through it. Go through an exercise where I'm actually going to be looking at data, I'm going to be interpreting it, et cetera. It's really, really helpful. In addition to the, let's go back over here to the online learning guides, they also have these really great exercise modules. And you can see this one's exploring data through research literature, but we also have some on voting behavior. So I'm going to look at investigating community and social capital. This basically everything that I need is in here. If I want to learn how to do this on my own, the data sets here, it doesn't give me the program to actually work with it, but I can actually go through and do all these exercises and learn how to actually work with data. And then they have information on data management and curation, which we're going to ignore for now. So ICPSR is a really great resource. Unlike SAGE research methods, it actually has data sets that you can use, and the data bibliography is really great for just treating as a database or thinking about how to work with data. But they also offer the teaching and learning aspects that SAGE research methods does as well. So I really like ICPSR, and I'm glad that WSU is a member. Now we're going to talk about Roper. Let me make sure I don't have any questions. Not so far. Okay, the reason that Roper is in brackets is because I'm really sad about this, but because of inflationary increases in the prices of resources and the pandemic, we're actually going to have to cancel Roper in January, I think. But I want you to, we're going to show it anyway, because at some point you might have access to it, and some of its resources are available without a subscription as well. But this is basically polling data. Roper is one of the major American polling companies, although this also gives you international polling as well. Some of this just gives you the top line, basically the little graph and little information. Others actually gives you data that you can download. And there are some data sets you can actually do sort of on-site cross tabulations between variables. And they have a bibliography as well. So we're going to go ahead and do a demo here. And I actually, I don't know what's going on with them. I've not been able to actually, I can't log into my account for some reason, which is really weird. So we're not going to do this. But before we actually do search Roper iPoll, we're going to go look at the Roper site in general. And you can see you can search iPoll, you can search the website, and kind of you can see some of the resources that they have. They have a lot. This is actually where you go for exit polling data. They have a lot of really good exit poll data, data archiving. And I want to emphasize this. I didn't talk about it with ICPSR, but it matters there too. If you use ICPSR data or Roper data, there's generally like a process that you have to go through. There's some guidelines, you have to kind of tell them that you're working with this, just so they know, and then make sure that you share the articles with them afterwards. And then they have Roper Center tools, which kind of shows you some of the tools they have. They have a guide to the iPoll, there's video tutorials, you can request a webinar, etc. So there's classroom materials as well, information on polling and public opinion, pioneers of polling, etc. If you want to learn about polling, that's something that you can do. But we're going to go back to actually go to the iPoll database, which is their database of polls. And I'm going to go ahead and do a search. So I'm going to search, let's see, what shall I search? Let's try student loans again. Okay, let's see what we find. Okay, they actually have two different data sets now. Long-standing methods is sort of like, the way people have been doing surveys for 100 years. Recently developed methods is sort of some new techniques that they're doing. And then it's divided into the actual questions, or we can actually go look at particular studies. So first of all, we'll look at a question. And you can see this one, financial problems dealing with the coronavirus, obviously student loans, that would be an issue. If I go look at this, you can see there's the question, and then it's giving me sort of the percentages. And then here is, here's a little figure, and I can take this and actually, get a copy of it. So I can copy it to image over here, and I can put it into a paper and make sure that I definitely want to make sure that I cite it. But let's go actually look at the study itself, or we'll look at some of these studies here so you can get an idea of it. So I'm going to go to studies and data sets. And again, notice all the ways in which I can filter over here by organization, by topic, by date, etc. Okay, when I have, when I see this little icon here, that means that I can actually get more information about the question. Okay, I can actually see here, I can look at the questions. This is, and if I click on these, I'll get all the top line information here. I can cite it. And then, I can choose what citation style. And here, if in many cases, they will actually have, in this case, I can only download the questions, but in many cases, you can actually download the data itself as data, and you can work with it in your own way. So a really nice resource, really good for polling. One of the things that people oftentimes forget too, is that polling is actually a primary source. So it's really interesting, if we did another search, let's do COVID. This is going to give us primary source data on basically how people are thinking about polling data, about COVID. So here's our studies over here. Okay, so, and you can see these are the ones where I can download it in particular formats. They're telling me the formats that they have. Transparency is actually this new thing that they have that's kind of giving you a sense of the quality of the data set. Okay, I am gonna, let's see, we're just gonna kind of go back over there. But I encourage you to take advantage of Roper while we're here. And you can see that there's some information here that's available for you, even if WSU isn't a member. Okay. So one of the things that's, oops, skipped a slide here, keeping up, one of the things that I found was that all of these services have these really great newsletters you can use to kind of keep up with things. So for ICPSR, and you can see in some cases I haven't been able to find a subscription link, so I'll be adding those, but ICPSR has a really cool publication called Data Bites. And you can see they're kind of telling you a little bit about ICPSR. And, in this case, it's like, they're telling you about their new projects, et cetera, talking about new webinars that they have, celebrating data-related literature, et cetera. So kind of a nice thing. They also have the bulletins that are they only come out, I think Databytes comes out every month, and bulletins come out every season. And in this case, they're really pushing the summer program. But again, talking about new projects that they have, events that are coming up, et cetera. So these can be really handy, kind of making sure you're aware of what you can get out of ICPSR. They also have an excellent YouTube channel. And they actually have, every 2 years, they have a data fair. And they put it's online, it's virtual, and all of the videos end up on their YouTube videos. So I can go over here to playlists and see. So they have these great videos on how to use ICPSR, but also things really working with the data itself. Okay, the next one is Sage. Sage has this really great thing. They basically have this methods minute. You can subscribe to it. Comes out every month, and it's going to push out, sort of giving you some of the good things about those resources here. Method Space is a free web page that they have with all sorts of social science stuff on it. So pretty short and very targeted. And they actually have those as well. And they don't have a YouTube channel. They have their own stuff. So, or the YouTube channel is just selling stuff. I need to take that out. Roper, the same thing. Here is the Roper Center Data Dive. And again, you can actually subscribe to this even if we're not a member anymore. And there's some useful stuff about kind of, what's going on and new data and data sets, et cetera. So kind of nice. And they have a blog as well. And you can see these blogs, some of these are going to be process blogs, like accepting applications, but some of these are going to be about the content, women in public opinion polling, pretty extensive. They'll be looking at data, et cetera. And you can see lots of citations over there. Okay, and then they also have a YouTube channel. It's amazing how many of these library vendors and resources have YouTube channels. And, this is really helpful. Some of these are going to be, again, some of it is like, congratulations to the winner of this. But if we go over and look at the playlists, we'll see some of them are tutorials, et cetera. So very helpful. Okay, let me check to see if there are any questions. Not so far. Okay, so what I wanted to do next is, I'm not going to take very much time because I want to leave some time for questions, but I wanted to quickly kind of talk a little bit about locating data sets outside. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is, I thought I'd changed this. Whoops. Government data, right. So the government is a huge sources of data, and they have actually put a lot of their data into data.gov, and where you can just basically search it for all sorts of different topics. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a search. I'm interested in data about student loan debt. Let's see if we find anything. I didn't test this one out beforehand. It's kind of more interesting when you do it. There we are. So I find 35 data sets that mention student loan debt here. And so I can look at federal student loan program data, college scorecards, census of governments. Let's go ahead and look at the federal student loan program data. And then this is going to give me a sense. I always want to take a look at the information. Most of this is open data. And here's the bibliographic data for the metadata for it. And then I can download it, right over this. I can go to the page and actually download the data. So a really great resource for finding things. And kind of a subset of this, specifically is census data. I'm actually not thrilled about this. I think the way they provided the data before was actually better. But you can see, and I actually took you to this landing page because it explains it a little bit more. But let's go ahead and look at Pullman, Washington. We'll go ahead and do our search. And you can see it's giving me some basic data over here, related searches that might work with other parts, other census publications. I'm getting some basic data. I'm getting maps. I can view all maps, and you can see lots of tables here. I'm looking at sort of basic sorts of stuff. And then I can kind of go ahead and take a look at some of these things too. There's also the ability for me to filter this. When I click filters, I can narrow my results down by topics, geography, years, surveys, codes, etc. And then topics will kind of give me that. So this is basically a way for me to access the data in a downloadable form. There's a number of different federal statistical agencies where you can go to get data, and on Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics, where you can download data sets all over here. You can see data tools, and we can see data retrieval tools. They have some specific things. They have some customized tables. This is going to be more of the statistics aspect, and then they're giving you more sources of data. So lots of government data. WSU, I have a government data and statistics. Oops, I wonder what I did there. That's always kind of interesting when I make a mistake like that. I'll check on that. But I actually have a government data and statistics library guide, and I'll actually make sure that that link is on the main page. Sources of international data as well, United Nations, etc. At every level of government, there is data. You can actually find data for Pullman, Washington, or whatever city you're in. So, okay, let's look at my next page. Basically, these are going to be data aggregators. And here's my page here, social science data, ICPSR, and more. RE3 data, Registry of Research Data Repositories, is kind of cool. It's basically a great place to find data. I'm going to go over it. Search, I don't find very useful. I find browse to be helpful. Browse by subject, so I can get a sense of the types of information here. Forget this wheel. It's totally useless. It's easier to go to text. So I'm going to look for social science data sets that they might have. You can see a wide range of this in the life sciences as well as the social sciences. Let's go look for, it's very broad. Let's go arbitrarily look for metal cutting, manufacturing, engineering. And this will actually, in this case, there are 0. There isn't something for everything, but in other cases, it will actually give me data sets. Okay, this is one of my favorite sources, Pew Research. I love the Pew Research Center in general. It's really high quality social science data. They have a wide variety of things, US politics, media, news, social trends, etc. And they're a really good example of how to write with data, how to actually incorporate data into your writing. But they also make a number of their data sets available for download. You can see they're linked right over there. This is a European source of data, CESSDA, and you can look at the catalog to get the metadata, or you can just go ahead and search for it. And then some fun sources. Google Data Search actually has a lot of data. I can do a search for COVID. I should spell it right. Okay, which is, it's like, I should just try this one right there. It's giving me right there. But you can see these, it has lots of data sets. And then over here, I can filter as well by format, usage rights, topic, last updated, etc. And then it'll actually take me to where I can download the data. Kaggle is a fun resource actually for data sets as well. And you can see you can add a new data set yourself. This, you can see kind of a wide variety of arbitrary things. I mean, they have stuff on soccer, they have stuff on COVID and airport traffic, sort of a random assortment. And then we have open data repositories. And you can see these will take you to data repositories about these particular topics. And actually, this is kind of a fun one. If you're a Redditor, here in Reddit, you can actually ask for somebody to tell you about a data set or share a data set right over here. Freely available. So, these are kind of just some examples of things that I've already sort of sussed out. But a lot of times, if you're looking for data, it's really helpful to just kind of put in your topic and then just look for in Google or Bing or whatever you're using, look for data repository, data archive, or data sets. These are terms that will enable you to find resources. There's lots of data out there, and I'll be expanding not just these resources and adding more to that site. I think I'll tell you something actually, and that is the importance of data literacy. And if we actually go back to ICPSR, they've got some interesting things in, not that one, over here, I think. Let's see if we can find this. I have too many windows open here. But there's a lot of stuff that you're going to find on their site and on other sites on data literacy. There actually used to be statistical and data literacy. There actually used to be a really nice site. What am I looking for? Yeah, not dataliteracy.com. I don't remember it, but I'll find it and put it into the guide. But basically, data literacy really is a crucial skill for the 21st century. And you don't have to necessarily be able to to actually manipulate data yourself. You don't have to be familiar with R, downloading data sets and putting them in. But a lot of this has, I just realized something. Let's go back to one of my slides. I'm trying out a different way of doing this, and I realized at some point I actually skipped over a really important slide, which is kind of related to this, which is that data isn't neutral. You know, the way we collect data isn't neutral. The way data is used isn't neutral in you know, machine learning or artificial intelligence or anything. There's this really good book by a government documents librarian, When Women Didn't Count, the Chronic Mismeasure and Marginalization of American Women in Federal Statistics. And he goes through and shows how women, you know, how basically women's were pretty much ignored in the census and in other agency statistics. So all this stuff was imputed. They got information on men and they imputed over to women. It wasn't necessarily the same thing. Then we have this book, Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. There's also a really good book by Sophia Noble called Algorithms of Oppression. And that's actually about sort of big data, machine learning, search engines, you know, how data can be misused to get and give sort of misleading responses because, you know, it's weighted differently or it doesn't include all voices. And this book, Differential Undercounts in the US Census, Who is Missed? Well, who is missed is actually, it's like women. It's like the homeless, people who are members of minority groups, people who have, you know, who have medical or mental disabilities. You know, it's just amazing how many people are missed, actually. So that's something we have to think about at all times when we're actually working with data, which actually, where was I forget kind of sort of where I was going with all of this, but oh, the data literacy part. You know, you may not necessarily need to really be able to do data analysis yourself, but it's really important to kind of be aware of these things about data, to understand how to read a statistical table, to understand what questions to ask when you see something that, you know, is coming from data. When was it collected? Who collected it? How is it funded? You know, all of these sorts of questions can be really important. Okay, let's see. Let's see. If I'm new to data research, what's the best resource to begin with? Easiest to navigate? I would actually start with Sage Research Methods. Let's go back over here to my questions. I think I'm at the very top. Yeah. Sage Research Methods is a really good one. And I think really where I would actually start is actually in that project planner, kind of walking you through all of that. But it just has so many resources, and you know, it seems like it's overwhelming, but the ability to filter really specifically, you know, filter. You know, look for things that are exactly the format that you want, in, you know, that are more recently published, etc., means that you can actually get what you need out of it. But you know, a lot of times people get to Sage Research Methods because all the books are in our library catalog and that takes them to the database, and they're really focused on the books. But there's so much to learn in the resources that they have to help you kind of, you know, learn how to be a researcher. The case studies, you know, the interviews, the videos, where you can actually, you know, where you can actually have people talking to you, telling you about why they did, what they learned, or as we saw with that one particular book, all the mistakes that they made so that you can learn from it. So yeah, very user-friendly, a really good resource, and I encourage people to take advantage of it because it is very powerful. It has a lot of stuff. But you know, but remember, when you're no longer at WSU, you won't have access to Sage Research Methods. You will, however, have access to all of those resources that I showed you in Sage Research Methods, because the teaching and learning stuff, this is not proprietary. You know, you can actually, you don't have to, you know, be from a member organization to use these. These are available for everyone. And you can see we were looking at classroom exercises, but there's also resources for students, a little bit more here. They'll take you to things. Excellent. How to read a journal article. I send so many people to that. It's a really great resource. But resources for teachers as well, external resources with data sources, videos, etc. So lots of really, really useful stuff here. There's just, you know, there's some really rich resources that you should take advantage of. And let me tell you something. If you take a research methods class, remember that that in addition to the stuff that you're reading in your research methods class, you can go do some work on your own. You can go to the library's resources, Sage Research Methods, etc., to supplement what you're learning in your class. In some cases, your instructor might actually be using Sage Research Methods or ICPSR resources. But if they're not, you know, sometimes when you read something, it doesn't speak to you. But when you read it, you go to find someone else talking about it, and all of a sudden it kind of makes sense to you. So remember that these are resources for you as well. These are supplementary resources that may be helpful to you in a research methods class, but resources that are available for everyone, regardless of whether you're taking research methods or not, because we all really need to be more data literate in the 21st century world. Really do. Yeah, take advantage of these resources, and talk to your professors. Ask them, how did you learn how to do research methods? And remember that although these are social sciences, for the social sciences, there's actually all sorts of things here for people in the humanities and the STEM fields as well. You'd be surprised how many humanities resources are actually in ICPSR. For a long time, it was the only place to actually upload data. So people just uploaded pretty much everything they had. These days, we have a lot more options for more disciplinary oriented places to upload data. So, a little bit less of the history and STEM stuff, but it's still there. Cool. Well, thanks very much. And for those of you who are watching this after the fact, if you have any questions, there's my email right there. I'm WSU Lorena on Twitter, and I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. Although, I can show you how to find data, but I'm not that great at the data analysis myself. I'm kind of a walking example of a person who is reasonably data literate without actually being able to, do data analysis in R. Although I've used some of the online software, and it's actually really cool. It's a really good way. It's a really good way to kind of step into thinking about working with data in the more extensive statistical packages like SPSS or Stata or R or the other ones that are out there.